Berry not only involved a discussion of element number 3, adequate provocation, there was also a legal question as to whether Berry had no reasonable time to cool off. Look at the Attorney General's argument in response to element number 4. It's located in the opinion. Even assuming there was adequate provocation, the Attorney General argues, Berry had a reasonable time to cool off. In fact, the Attorney General says he had 20 hours in that apartment to cool off. This is very good lawyering. As an attorney, one should never rely on only making one argument if there are others to make. Consider all possible relevant arguments when you review an issue. Here, the Attorney General made 2 legal arguments to counter voluntary manslaughter. The first involved whether there was adequate provocation. The Attorney General says there wasn't. The court says, sorry, wrong, we're going to send it to the jury on that. The second argument is whether there was really no time to cool off. The Attorney General is going to lose on this one too. Just as it did with element number 3, adequate provocation, the modern view revises element number 4, no reasonable time to cool off. Under the traditional test, you're going to recall, the killing had to be sudden, right on the heels of the provocation. But the modern view doesn't require this. It doesn't view element number 4 in such a limited way. Sometimes no reasonable time to cool off is not so literal in terms of the number of hours or days. Sometimes emotions build up over time rather than de-escalate over time. That's also human nature. You stew, you steam, in your mind it gets worse and worse. The court says that the long course of provocatory conduct could lead to an escalation of feelings rather than a cooling down. I want to give you an example. Let's take a defendant who's been sexually abused by her parent. Doesn't matter the jurisdiction, this would meet element number 3, adequate provocation. But now suppose defendant doesn't kill her abuser right away, or even weeks or months later. She grows up, she's 20, she's 25, she's reliving the memory of the abuse continually, and her feelings now of wanting to kill escalate over time against her parent rather than diminish. Under the traditional test, we're going to demand that they diminish. Her killing her abuser 10 years later, for example, won't be manslaughter because of the lack of element number 4, because of the lack of suddenness. Of course, that would assume there's no rekindling of emotions, but if there is none, she can't just knock on the door of her father or mother's home and kill that person. The law will have demanded of her that she cool off. But interestingly, in a modern jurisdiction, element number 4 is looked at differently. The jury can still entertain manslaughter, even though the killing is done 10 years later. It doesn't mean, again, she gets manslaughter, but she will have the opportunity to make the argument that she didn't have a reasonable time to cool off, that her feelings actually escalated over time rather than calm down.